There was the Tatum family. He was a barber on the cut that lived 30 on Carter Blvd. And there was the Green family on Alberta Street. A lot of the boys was good boxers. There was a Terrell family on Alberta. There was the Gardner family and Frida that lived on Alberta. There was Mr. and Mrs. McKinley Washington family that lived on Alberta. There was the Allen family that lived on Carter Blvd, later moved to Grand. There was the two sisters, the Miss Smith and Miss Goss family that lived side by side on Carter Blvd. There was the Spencer family that lived on 34th. There was the Jackson family that had a grocery store on 31st, 4th. There was Mr. and Mrs. McKenzie family on 34th. He was a barber and he cut hair in the back of his home on 34th Street. And there was Miss Doll William that lived on 34th. And there was the Wilson family that raised chicken and sold eggs on 34th Street. And there was the Clarence William family, my father-in-law and mother-in-law on 34th Street. And there was the Plumer Moore family. He was a reverend, and they lived on 34th Street. There was the Crowder family that lived on 34th Street. There was the Hartfield family that lived on 34th Street and Carter Blvd. There was the Campbell family that lived next door to the Liberty Baptist Church. There was the Hackett family that lived on Carter Blvd West. Mr. Hackett, he was a plumber. There was the Jimmy Yates family that lived on Carter Blvd West. There was the Marsh family that lived on Carter Blvd West. There was the Ellis Smith family that lived on West 31st. There was the Marshall Clay family that lived on Grand Street. There was the Cartwright family that lived on 32nd Street. There was the Black family that lived on 32nd Street. There was the Clement family that lived on 32nd Street. There was the Murdoch family that lived on 2nd Street. There was the Arthur Dunn family that lived on Grand. There was the Murphy family, Zephyr and her husband, that lived on 29th. And he was the out-walkingest man that you ever did see. He could walk all over Tyler. And there was Miss Kennedy and the Hodge family that lived on Grand. And Miss Kennedy, she could still work in her flower beds and bend over and weed the flower bed at the age of 95 years old. And there was the Taylor family that lived next door to Professor Griffin on 30th Street. There was the Clarice David family that lived on 32nd Street. There was Coach Jives Wright family that lived on 30th Street. And there was Dr. and Miss Glass that lived on Grand Street. And there was Mr. and Mrs. Moon that owned the Moon grocery store that lived on Grand Street. There was the Henry family that lived on Grand Street. There was the Albert Redwine family that lived on Grand Street. There was the Leonard Stark family that lived on Grand Street and later moved to the Texas College apartment. And there are many more families that I can't recall that have later gone to glory. And there was churches in the area. There was the Liberty Baptist Church. There was the Sand Flat Baptist Church. There was the True Light Baptist Church. There was the Progressive Baptist Church. There was the Love Temple Church of God in Christ. And there was the Revival Center Church of God in Christ. Oh yes, while I'm thinking about it, there was the Moten family that lived on Carter Blvd. And there was business areas in the College Park addition. There was Melrose Nursing Home. There was Tyler Sheet and Metal. There was the Fishing Hole. There was Texas College. There was Kristen Barrel's Funeral Home on Grand. There was Moon Cleaners. There was the Giving Shoe Shop. There was Humphrey Photo Studio. There was Moon Grocery Store. It was a small grocery store, but Mr. Moon had a big inventory, just about anything you wanted, from a wash tub to a lamp chimney, he had it. And you know and remember the Easy Way grocery store, where my daughter Teresa worked. There was the old Green Top Cafe with Houseman, who had the best hamburgers in town. And who would forget the Young Pharmacy, where you could go and buy a cherry Coke, a malt, a milkshake. And there was Miss Wilson's Sandwich Shop. And there was the Gizmo. All of these businesses have mostly gone. We lived in an area where the black business was flourishing in time, but now they have all passed and gone away. And as I say, it was a neighborhood that you could be proud to live in. And now the duplex have moved in, and people's move in and out, and you don't even know their name before they are gone. But as I said, if you was children living up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was the best of time for you. It was a safe time where you could be children and where the whole neighborhood looked out after you. Who would forget a neighborhood that had such peoples as Uncle Jesse and Aunt Susie and Aunt Claudia, and don't forget about Grandma Lula. Grandma Lula was the hubnut of the neighborhood. When she spoke, people would listen. I want to call her Mother Dear. It was people like this that was in the neighborhood that made you who you are as individuals today. So I wished I could be there with you in person, but I couldn't, so forgive me. I'm trying to think of all of this as it came to me. It wasn't in any chronological order, but I hope as I have went back and forth that you will reminisce some of the good things that you remember. I have seen you on Facebook, and I know you know a lot of things that happened in your childhood that you could recall. So think back on these memories and discuss them with your children and grandchildren so they too might remember the good old days in the College Boulevard neighborhood reunion. Thank you very much.